Recording in progress.
Okay, hi, good morning everyone. Hope everyone is doing well as we inch our way towards Hanukkah. It's so exciting. Such a nice time. Kislev, the month of Kislev is so wonderful. Hope everyone is enjoying it and feeling good. Okay, so we'll begin. As people are coming in, I'll kind of let them hit in, but we'll get started. So I want to begin with, as usual, with thank yous. Obviously, thanking Hakadosh Baruch Hu for us being able to come together again, and dedications. If anyone has anyone they want to dedicate the shiur to, please by all means go ahead. You can put it in the chat, and I'm going to add some dedications here for Refuah Shlema, for Daniel Ben Hana, Alfred Ben Regina, Shidduch for Aviva Bas Bracha, and Emma Bas Sara, and also Shmira for Yarden Bas Rachel and Hadar Bas Rachel.
I have one.
Okay, please.
My dear friend passed away, and her name is Sarah Bat Leah, and
Lelui Nishma Sarah Bat Leah. It'll be Bas, her father's name. Now she's.
I don't think of the father's name right now.
No, that's okay. Hashem knows. Hashem knows. Okay, amazing. If anyone else has, you can say it or you can post it in the chat. Okay, so let's get started. So I want to begin by telling you a little bit about a tzaddik whose yahrzeit is going to be coming up. I'm sure most of you have probably heard of his name, although you may or may not know much about him, but it's Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, otherwise known as Rebbe or Rebbe HaKadosh. Rebbe was, of course, he is the one who codified the oral Torah by creating the Mishnah, which ultimately became the basis for all of the Talmud. And he was known to be a huge tzaddik, but also a bridge between the Jewish community and the Romans in his day. He spoke the language of the Romans, and one of the more famous things about him is that he was actually very close with the Roman Emperor Antoninus. And it was actually that relationship of Rebbe with Antoninus that enabled the Sanhedrin to go forward with codifying the oral Torah and bringing that into existence, so that people understood, that we didn't lose. So basically, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi realized that the generations were going down in their ability to remember and manage the oral Torah, and he realized that if they didn't get it written down, it would be lost. So he was really the one who put that into motion, and it's due to him that we've basically had the oral Torah saved for us. I want to just read a little bit about him. So I don't know if I said this or not. So basically, his yahrzeit is going to be on the 15th of Kislev, which this year falls out on December 9th. So that would mean that I believe the evening of December 8th at sundown will be the beginning of his yahrzeit, and then all day December 9th. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit about him so we can, in his schos, hopefully have a great learning today together. Yehuda Hanassi, or what they used to call Judah, it's translated as Judah the Prince, right? Also known as Rebbe, also known as Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our Master and Holy One, was the 2nd century rabbi and chief redactor and editor of the Mishnah. He was a key leader of the Jewish community during the Roman occupation of Judea. According to the Talmud, he was of Davidic line, and meaning the royal line of David, hence the title Prince, Nasi. The title Nasi was also used for presidents of the Sanhedrin, and Yuna HaNasi died on the 15th of Kislev in 3978, around December 1, 217 CE. When I was doing the research for the class, actually, quite coincidentally, I found in Rabbi Avigdor Miller's book, the one that I was talking about last week, Olam Haba, actually a question and answer about Yehuda Nasi, and I thought it's kind of the timing is so great. So I want to read this to you because the relationship that they had was very special. I'll cut through some of it, but basically the question that someone asks Rabbi Avigdor Miller is, was Antoninos granted Olam Haba because of his relationship with Rebbe? And so this is Rabbi Avigdor Miller's answer. Yes, and not just any place in Olam Haba. To understand his reward, we must study what he did, the great, unique, and difficult task that he accomplished. It goes on to discuss at the time the wars that were going on with the Romans. The War of Beitar was a very bitter battle between Jews and Romans, lasted for many years. After the war, Jewish survival struggled just to stay alive. The Romans remained very angry at Bnei Israel and issued terrible decrees. For 7 years, they didn't let them bury their dead. This was just one of the decrees. There were all kinds of decrees against the Jews at that time. At that time, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rebbe, traveled to Rome to appeal to the Roman Senate and Emperor to rescind these decrees. In Rome, he met a young Roman, and the two hit it off. They more than hit it off. It was the beginning of a lifelong friendship of the most powerful bond. This young Roman later became the Emperor Antoninos, and he is also known in history as Marcus Aurelius. You can even find the book he wrote in a public library, The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This emperor became a Talmud of Rebbe, so he literally became a student of Rebbe. It goes on to talk about that Antoninos used to vacation in Caesarea and Eretz Yisrael. There had been multiple tunnels dug underneath the ground throughout the wars, and that essentially there was a tunnel that Antoninos used to use in order to go to Rebbe's home and study with him without people knowing. And it was this relationship between Rebbe and Antoninos that really enabled Rebbe to accomplish what he accomplished. It says here, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael were in a very tenuous position at that time that could not last much longer under Roman rule. The base of Mikdash had already been destroyed. The Romans had taken complete control of the land and restricted the study of Torah. Rebbe knew he had to prepare the Am Yisrael for Galus, and to survive Galus, they would need to take radical steps of putting the oral law in writing. The time had come to seal the Mishnah. Rabbi Avigdor Miller adds here, just to be clear, Rebbe did not make the Mishnah. The wording of the Mishnah was formulated centuries earlier by the Anshe Knesset Hagadola. The Mishnah originated at Sinai when Moshe was given it by Hashem. But the oral law, the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, reformulated the language of the Mishnah and made it Lashon Kavua, a formal text that was then used moving forward. It was at that time and for the purposes of this friendship with Antoninos that this came to fore. Despite the dangers to his own life, Antoninos told Rebbe, go ahead, do what you have to do to save your people. I will protect you. And so the timing of all of this is obviously very serendipitous. I love the fact that it happened to come up in our shiur at this particular time when we're talking about Olam Haba. I love the fact that it's going to be Rebbe Ziertzeit coming up, and of course the fact that we're going to be entering into the times of Chanukah, which is also about Nisim v'Niflaos. I think it is really purely a miracle that Hashem created this close relationship with Rebbe and Antoninos, and it was really the channel through which we were able to survive as a people, and we were able to codify our oral Torah and have a written documentation for all the generations to come in the Galus. So I thought that's very, very special. It's really worth reading and learning more about this relationship between Rebbe and Antoninos if you have time and you want to learn about it. But nonetheless, we're looking at being able to honor Rebbe Ziertzeit on the evening of December 8th, going into December 9th, 15th of Kislev. Okay. Okay, I think let me just make sure nobody's waiting to get into the class. Okay, great. Okay, perfect. So that's our tzaddik for today. I want to, so just as a reminder, last week we had the first shiur on, the concept of Gilgulim, reincarnation, the discussion of us as souls in physical bodies, living in a physical world. That our inherent creation is something that is a fusion between the seen and the unseen, the physical and the spiritual, and having a general understanding of that begins to give us some kind of insight and appreciation to the fact that all of the olam that Hashem created, all of this physical world, everything that is described throughout Breshit, and all the subsequent history and story of the Torah, and leading us up to this very day, is the fact that Hashem has a system with which how He runs the world, created the world, and we are all a part of that, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. And a part of that creation is the idea that we have something called Gilgulim. We have reincarnation, where souls have opportunities to do things over again, better, or serve a purpose in the world that Hashem wants for us. So what I would really like to do is to just start with a general kind of review from you guys of the things that you remember from the first class, things that stuck with you or things you had in your notes, so that we kind of refresh and warm up before we get into the second part of this that I want to introduce today. So would anyone like to begin volunteering to help do a little bit of a review from last week? Some of the major concepts and things we talked about.
Okay, let me start.
Please.
Good morning, everyone. So, I've never been a person to think about what's going to happen with me after I pass away. Never. Like, even in my past life as a believer of in Christianity, I've never really grasped the thought, and I never really worried about that. I worried more about living the best that I can live in this life. So then to hear Rav Avigdor Miller to have the same belief, like, because of his training and his studies, like said, okay, so that's good that I have someone back up. So another thing is, what I got out of the class is that to continue perhaps thinking, not to be worried so much about what is going to happen next, but do the best that I can to be the best version that I can be in this lifetime, and hope that I don't have to come back again. And I pray to fulfill my eternal mission, what is my soul mission in this lifetime, so I don't have to come back. And I thank you. It's been beautiful. I'm so looking forward to this class, the class today, and all the other ones to learn more about it.
Good, Bezat Hashem. Okay, excellent. Okay, who else wants to add to that? What were some of the other major concepts or takeaways from last week that you guys remember?
This is Mia, and I would summarize by saying that we live in this world, and we have a tendency, which is only normal, to focus on this world, the things we can see, touch, smell, taste, all of our senses. But the truth is, we're really a soul or collection of parts of souls, and we're here for that's our real purpose. And to grasp that, as we study Gilgulim and everything, really, that our whole purpose is informed. Our whole purpose is, and it should inform everything we do physically in this world.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, very good. Right? So in building on that, it's the idea of understanding that that we, if you remember the analogy that I gave you, the idea of like building off of what both of you are saying, that we are in a temporary state of being in this world, right? This is not the beginning and it's not the end. So if you remember, I made the analogy of the foyer and the banquet hall, right? The idea that, somebody walks into a giant, beautiful, event location, and they walk in the foyer and they're blown away by how gorgeous the foyer is, and they think that's the destination. And the receptionist says, oh, no, the destination, you're only in the foyer. You're in the temporary holding area. The real party is behind the double doors, right? The real reward, the real joy, the real pleasure. The real ultimate destination is behind the double doors in the big banquet hall. That's where it's all going on. We tend to get distracted by our experiences here in the physical world, and that causes us to lose sight of the ultimate goal of why we're here and where we're going. And so you can see and appreciate that these concepts require some fundamental understandings and fundamental integration of concepts related to the fact that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So that sounds very, woo-hoo and out there and esoteric, but it's really actually written throughout all the texts of Judaism. The idea of us being a neshama, the idea of the physical world being a transient one, someplace where we spend, if we're lucky, 100 years, and then we leave this body. Perhaps to come back, perhaps not to come back. It really depends on what we did with our time here. But you remember also one of the things that we talked about, which is one of those other, so you've got the fundamental idea that we are a spiritual being having a physical experience, right? If you begin to study about that, it's really fascinating, the idea that the soul becomes fused with the physical cells of the body. And that's where the interaction takes place from the physical and the spiritual world. We become one. And it's written a lot about the fact that when the soul departs the body, in 120 years, at the end of one's life, when the soul departs the body, that my understanding from the things that I've read is that it's actually can be painful. For as much as the soul did not want to go into the body, right? When Hashem said, get in there, you're going in, the soul doesn't want to go into the body. But then once the soul is in the body and it becomes a partner and a fusion with the body, it also doesn't want to leave the body. Change is hard. We know that, right? Even in this world, we understand that any kind of change is hard. And life is really just a series of changes that we go throughout our life, changes and challenges. But then, because the soul and the body have become one and become so close, the soul doesn't want to leave the body because it's another change. It's another transition. But of course, those decisions are not up to us. We don't decide when we come in, and we don't decide when we leave. This is entirely in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hands. And what we can do is tap into the other foundational concept that we talked about last week, which is the whole idea of free will. So if you remember, the only way that this entire system will work, that Hashem created, is if he gave us, as his creations, free will to make choice about how we spend our time, about what we choose to do, about whether we choose to draw ourselves close to him or we wind up getting distracted and pulled away by the physical world and all that encompasses. And so these ideas of free will, about having choice, about doing this or doing that, on top of which you have the added challenge that every single person, when they come into this world, is not only welcome into the world by whoever births them, but also by the Yetzer Hara, which is, the element, the aspect of ourselves that's kind of our internal, personal challenger, that's going to present those roadblocks and stumbling blocks that we have to overcome in order to earn our spiritual reward. So a lot of us will look at, and I think we've touched on this before in classes, a lot of us will look at the Yetzer Hara Does everybody remember what the Yetzer Hara is, right? It's that part of this system that Hashem created that is meant to pull us away from our ultimate mission. The Yetzer Hara's job is to make sure we don't do our job. That is his full-time mission. And every single person has their own Yetzer Hara that is waiting to jump on them the second that they come out of the birthing canal. So we all have the Yetzer Hara. We all have the things that distract us. That works in conjunction with our inherent character traits, our midos, the things that we're born with that are good and bad, that we have to overcome, challenges and situations that will come up with Ben Adam le'atzmo, right? Internal thought processes, right? This all goes back to our very, very beginning classes. Things we have to overcome in our own personal makeup of who we are. Ben Adam le'chavero, things that we're going to have to overcome in terms of our relationships with other people on this planet, whether it be those that we're related to in this lifetime, our parents, our siblings, our spouses, our children, and then of course our neighbors, really anybody. Ben Adam l'chavero is us and any other human being. And then of course Ben Adam l'makom, the actual direct relationship each one of us has with God. Those relationships also have their own challenges, right? If we believe that there are certain things that we're meant to do and certain precepts that Hashem has put forward, this is, instruction on how to draw closer to Him. And then we have our Yetzer Hara that, that we set as a goal for ourselves. I want to daven 3 times a day, but the Yetzer Hara gets in the way. Either things come up, or we forget, or we're tired, or our kids are screaming, or whatever is the reason. So he's in the mix, always in the mix, trying to prevent us from really achieving our goals. And if we keep in mind what we discussed last week, so the ultimate goal, right? The ultimate purpose of our existence is for us to be able to earn our Olam Haba, our place in the afterlife that is as close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as is possible. And we got in a little bit to, how we do that, right? Mitzvot, and Masim Tovim, and Chesed, and overcoming our own personal challenges, and working on our midos, and becoming better people, like you were saying in the beginning of the class, the idea of focusing on, how do we become the best person in this lifetime that we can be, whether or not we're focusing on that as a function of earning Olam Haba, or we're just focusing on that because we want to become better people. So So Rav Avigdor Miller talks about the fact that a mitzvah is a mitzvah, right? When you do a mitzvah, of course it counts. But what also counts is the intention and the thought process behind it. So you can take any mitzvah and you can act out that mitzvah in the physical world, and that counts as a mitzvah. But if you have a higher level intention behind it, and if you express that higher level intention to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your mind, in your language, in your words, then you elevate that mitzvah automatically. So now it becomes shinier, right? It becomes more valuable. If you're doing the example that I've heard many Rebbeim use, especially with men in particular, but it applies to everybody, is, let's say you go to Shachris every morning. A man is going to go to Shachris, he's going to daven in minyan every single day. Which is one of the things that a Jewish man is meant to do. He's meant to join in with a minyan in order to daven every morning. So let's say he's doing that. He's physically getting out of bed. He's physically going to the shul. He's physically putting on tefillin. He's physically putting on a talit. He's physically holding a siddur, a siddur, a prayer book. He's physically saying the words. The prayers are coming out of his mouth. He's participating. He's helping to make a minyan. Those are all very big mitzvot. But Rav Avigdor Miller talks about, as do many, many Rebbeim, if you're just going and doing and fulfilling the mitzvah at the base level of physicality, right? You're going through the motions. Do you get credit for that mitzvah? Absolutely, you get credit for that mitzvah. But how much better could it be? How much richer could the mitzvah be? How much, I always like to use the word shiny, how much shinier, how much more sparkly could your mitzvah be in Shamayim if you brought to that the spiritual essence, right? Everything in this world, our entire experience, is meant to be experienced on two levels, the physical and the spiritual. That is the entire construct of Hashem's creation. There is no such thing as physicality without spirituality. It doesn't exist. So I like to use the analogy of electricity, okay? You can have all the electricity in the world, but if you do not have the proper wires and the proper protective layer on those wires and the proper plug at the end of the wire and then the outlet to put it into, you can't access it. So you can have all the electricity in all the world, but if you don't have a way to harness it, if you don't have a way to channel it in a safe way, that you can actually utilize it, so then it's meaningless to you. It's of no good to you in this world. This world is entirely a fusion of the spiritual and the physical. In this world, one cannot exist without the other. Okay? We must have both. So when you take that now and apply it to the example I was just giving about a man going to shul, etc., you can have the physical, but how much more powerful is it if you infuse that electricity, if you infuse that spirituality, that intention of merging the spiritual with the physical in this world? Okay? So one of the main differences between this olam and any of the other olamot that are not physical is that in order to facilitate change, in order to actually conduct a mitzvah, in order to build olam haba, in order to generate spiritual koach and spiritual energy, in order to bring that light down into this world, we must have both. We must have the physical and the spiritual. And by having the intention and the consciousness of wanting to bring the light into the world, it infuses our davening with so much more. It infuses all of our mitzvot with a much richer context. So you have to know that in the 13 Ikarim, the 13 essential principles of Judaism that Rambam wrote, one of them is the idea that Hashem knows the thoughts of every human being. So you have to ask yourself, why is that important? Why does Hashem want to know the thoughts of every human being? So this is a part of why Hashem wants to know the thoughts of every human being. He wants to see, where are you? Where are you when you're doing everything in this physical world? Where are you holding with it? Are you just doing it because someone told you to do it, because that's what you saw done, and so you're going to continue to do it because that's what you saw done? I mean, that's fine. That is one level to do stuff. But you're not sitting in a shiur because that's how you want to do things, right? You're not listening to the shiur because you want to stay the same. Generally speaking, someone listening to a shiur is because they want to grow, they want to learn, they want to infuse new insights into the things they're doing on a daily basis. So this concept of olam haba, the idea of elevating your consciousness to become aware of the fact that yes, we're living a physical life. Yes, we have obligations in this world. Yes, Hashem has already given us, He has given us a rule book and instructions through the Torah of how to maximize our time here. But we have the free will to choose how we're going to do it, if we're going to do it, and in the end, we're going to find out how we did. Does all of that make sense? So I want to pause here. Are there any questions to this point? In terms of understanding, because if you take nothing else from any shiur of any time of ever you've listened to me, this would be one of the points I would want you to take with you on a day-to-day basis. To wake up every morning and remind yourself that when you say Moda Ani Lefanecha, Melech Chai V'Kayam. I am so indebted to you and grateful to you, Hashem, for giving me another breath and giving me another day, another opportunity to earn my Olam Haba. It doesn't say that outright in the words of the davening, of the prayer, when you wake up and you open your eyes and you say, oh my gosh, my soul has returned to its body. I have yet another chance. That you infuse that action of thanking Hashem when you open your eyes before your feet hit the floor to say, Hashem, I understand I have a purpose here, and I understand that in the end of the day, right, in 120 years, there will be an accounting of every second of my life here. And I want you to know, Hashem, I'm going to live my life today with the intention of knowing that I'm building towards something, even though I can't see it. I know you and I love you and I trust you. And I'm going to make my deposits up there with you. I'm going to make my investments. I'm going to take my actions and my thoughts today in this world. I'm going to make my investments for the world to come. Just having that thought elevates everything you do for your entire day.
Beautiful. It's beautiful the way you said it.
Good, Baruch Hashem. I hope it goes. These concepts, I think they're not spoken about enough in general. You could spend 20 lifetimes learning what Judaism has to offer. There are not enough lifetimes to learn everything that Judaism has to offer. I view myself as basically ignorant, to be honest with you, because there's so much to know and so little time within which to know it. Especially as a Jewish woman on this planet, we have so much responsibility with our families, God willing, and the chesed that we're inherently designed to be able to do. And the sharing and the caring and then building the connection with Hashem and having the responsibility of the future of Am Yisrael, which is really on our shoulders exclusively. I mean, it's written about in multiple places. The responsibility of Am Yisrael is really on the shoulders of the women of Am Yisrael. And so anything that we can do to integrate this concept of understanding our role in this tiny, tiny speck, a window of time that we have in the physical world, in the tapestry of all of Jewish history, then we understand that we are a part of a continuum. Now, that leads me into the context for this shiur. But before I move into that direction, I just want to make sure that everyone is really clear about what I've said. Are there any questions or comments, anything outstanding about anything I've said so far to address?
Robertson?
Yes.
I have a question. So what about somebody, because we're thinking about thought, you're talking about thoughts, but what about somebody that they have like the brain of like, they're here physically, but their mind is like 5,000 miles like somewhere else. Oh my gosh, like, they're praying, but then like, I don't know, like they try to concentrate, but then their mind is like, oh my gosh, I have to take care of the baby, I have to do washing, I have to do laundry, I have to do washing the dishes. It's like so hard, like, you say one bracha, let's say the brachot in the morning, and like, you're like, oh my gosh, did I say it, did I not say it? Like, you try it out with kavanah, but then like, I don't know. Like I feel like every mitzvah like the person wants to do, their concentration is like a little bit, but then like it's out the window.
It's very hard. Yeah, it's very, very hard. It's really hard. I know, and that's I think the vast majority of people would express the same sentiment that you're saying. That I actually have read quite a bit about this. Rav Avigdor Miller also wrote a book about davening, about tefillah. If you're interested, you can read that as well. Listen, generally speaking, as a generation, we already know that in the times right before Mashiach, we're already at like the lowest point, right? So every generation we go down a bit, our capabilities go down, our concentration goes down, our knowledge goes down. This is just the way that it is, right? And we always know it's darkest before the dawn, and that's the same is true for this process of Hashem's creation from the beginning of time until the days of the revelation of Mashiach. So we have to just know that we're really living in a very complicated and difficult period of time. And that these generations, hopefully I say this generation, meaning Mashiach is going to come now. There's other Shem that will have the zchut to witness that. That we're living in really the hardest times to date. And so Hashem knows that. And one of the things that many Rebbeim discuss in this time is that, a mitzvah, let's just take a mitzvah of, what's kind of like a basic one. Let's just take tznius, modesty, right? Dressing modestly, right? A woman who's dressing more modestly today is most likely going to get a greater zchut, a greater reward for doing that in today's day and age than, let's say, they would have 50 years ago, right? 50 years ago, a woman would not ever think to walk naked in the street. Like, that's not even a thing. Like, if you look at in the photographs that you see of the 1940s, the 1950s, it wasn't really until the 1960s that you kind of started to see that. In the 60s, mid to late 60s and 70s, and then it kind of went all downhill from there. But when you go back and you look at the photographs from the 1940s and the 1950s, everyone was dressed. Like, it wasn't really even a thing. Not only were they dressed, men were going out of their house in suits and caps. That was...
Those there?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I have to say that what stuck out to me on the lecture of Rabbi Nathaniel just last week is that the mission of our generation is modesty.
Yes, exactly.
That stuck out to me so wide, so loud and clear.
And he's a huge tzaddik, Rabbi Nathaniel, and so when you talk about, I've heard that before also. I've heard that one of the greatest challenges for especially women in this generation is tznius, is modesty, and for men it's shmiras einayim, it's watching their eyes. Now, it's not a coincidence. Think about that. The greatest challenge for women is to be tznius. What is it? His name is Rabbi Nathaniel. Nathaniel is his last name. That the challenge for women is dressing modestly, and the challenge for men is for them to watch their eyes. Do you see? There's no coincidence, right? That's hand in hand. If I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to qualify it. If, for example, women were dressed more modestly, men would have an easier time watching their eyes, right? That's logical. Is that not logical? Yes, no?
Yes.
Logical, right? Yes. Okay? That if women were more modestly dressed, men would have an easier time watching their eyes. Okay? Now, having said that, someone could say, well, it's not a woman's responsibility for a man to watch his eyes. That's actually written. It's not. Women are not responsible for the actions of men and the choices of men. Men are also given free will. Okay. However, it's also written that a woman who makes it intentionally more difficult for a man to watch his eyes, meaning she's seeking attention and validation, right, from, let's say, men or people who are not her husband or whatever, and she's doing that through immodest dress or behavior, that there are consequences to that. There are consequences for being the source through which a man might look. Is she responsible for him looking? Absolutely not. That's not her responsibility. He will have his own judgment for making the choices that he makes. But she's not innocent. She's not an innocent actor in the drama that is Hashem's creation. Okay? So everything, and this is, I think, a good segue into the next part of the content for the lecture. Everything in Hashem's world is a perfect calculation. Okay? So we have to understand that when you have the concept of Olam Haba, which is closely tied with the idea of Gilgulim, right? Because you're talking about the idea that why would somebody need to come back in a Gilgul? First of all, I want to preface everything I say by saying there is no way for understanding or knowing cheshbonot shamayim. There's no way for us to know or understand the calculations of shamayim, Hashem's calculations. There's no way for us to know. We can make a hypothesis, we can guess, we can look at the texts, okay? We can do all kinds of assessments and evaluations and studying, and in the end, Hashem will decide to do what Hashem wants to do because it is His creation, and only He understands the entire landscape of human race, of humanity, from the beginning of creation of Adam until the revelation of Mashiach. Only Hashem sits from that vantage point to understand how we all relate to each other throughout history, and how some event that He created 3,000 years ago is why we are all sitting here today, why some of us are sitting in the lecture and some of the regulars who are meant to be here, are normally here, are not here. Right? This is only cheshbonot shamayim. We don't know. So I want to preface everything I say by that. Okay, having said that, when you look at Olam Haba, we understand there's a greater purpose for our existence. We understand that this world is temporary. We understand we're given an opportunity to be here in a physical body in order to build and invest and earn our Olam Haba, in order to draw closer to Hashem throughout our lifetime, so that God willing, we're sitting with Him in 120 years. That is where we want to be, is as close to Him as possible with the best seat in the house. Okay? And then that ties into the idea of Gilgulim. Why would somebody need to come back? Hashem makes that calculation. Perhaps He sends somebody back because they have things they need to overcome and improve. Or maybe they're a tzaddik. Maybe they were an absolute tzaddik, okay? But there's one or two things that they have to do that they didn't have an opportunity to do. You know, I've read that a lot of times when we see things such as, honestly, even miscarriage, or chas v'shalom lo aleinu, children or younger people, you know, that pass away at a young age. That's not the traditional pattern of, you know, childhood, adulthood, old age, passing away. That doesn't follow that normal, you know, lifespan curve. That there's the possibility that happens because that person had something very specific that they needed to accomplish or achieve, and it only took that amount of time in a physical body in order to do it. Okay? So there's that calculation that comes into it. It could be like we discussed last week, the idea that when someone comes back in a Gilgul, I reminded you last week, don't be so certain that you're going to come back in a human body. If you were a rasha, if you were wicked, if you were somebody who was doing chas v'shalom, a lot of averos, you may not have the luxury of coming back in a human body. You may have to just sit in a rock somewhere, or maybe you need to come back as an animal. We don't know, right? We don't know those calculations. So the best that we can do is to try to conceptualize the creation that Hashem has made and the system in which He's plugged us all into, so that we can make the most of it. All right? So when you tie Olam Haba with the idea of Gilgulim, there's one other piece to this that we absolutely cannot ignore. And that is that Hashem's judgment is perfect. Hashem does not make mistakes. His judgment, His cheshbon, His calculations are perfection. Okay? And the way we know this is because it is literally written throughout almost all the texts of Judaism. Everything, you will find it everywhere. That the system that Hashem runs the world on is midah keneged midah. Midah keneged midah. Meaning, it's almost like the equivalent of saying an eye for an eye, right? That everything in Hashem's world is balanced, becomes balanced through His judgment, and only His judgment. And that is the foundational piece upon which Hashem runs the world. Which means, when you take that concept of His perfect and unwavering and unerring judgment, and you apply it to your life experience, to what you witness, to what you view, to the things you think you understand, and the things you don't understand, and the things that we could never, ever, ever understand, such as the horrible things that the Jewish nation has experienced throughout history, atrocities that we see, suffering that we see. We have to know that if we believe in a Kadosh Baruch Hu, we have to believe in His perfection of His creation, and we have to believe in Midah Keneged Midah, which means there is a reason behind everything that happens in this world, even if we could not possibly fathom what it is. So if we cannot take comfort in the things that we see or the things that we experience, that in an absolute minimum, bitachon, right? Certainty in a Kadosh Baruch Hu means that we fully accept that we are a part of the system He created, that He runs the world on Midah Keneged Midah, meaning it is perfectly just in every way, without exception. And that this ties into Gilgulim, why a soul would need to come back, what it needs to correct, and it ties into our building of our own Olam Haba in the world to come. So these are the pillars upon which the world is standing. And if we grapple with it, if we think about it, if we give ourselves over to these contexts, these concepts, and we zoom out to look at the fact that our life, our personal life, it's everything. It's everything. It's written that we have the right to say, Hashem created the world for me. The world was created for me. It's written. It's written that we, every single human being, has the right to say, and especially every Jew, the world was created for me, for my experience, for my growth. Right? And at the same time, we also know that we are but a speck on the spectrum of all of history of Hashem's creation. So it's living in a paradox. It's understanding that nothing happens by chance. Everything that we see, everything that comes before us, everything we become witness to or we hear about that comes to our ears, comes to our eyes, that it's not by accident, that it's something that Hashem is putting in front of us for us to learn from, that our challenges, our experiences are uniquely ours and a part of the curriculum that Hashem wrote for us when He shoved our soul into a body and said, you're going in. Right? You're going in. It's your turn. You're on the stage now. Let's see what you're going to do with it. So we all came in with our own personal curriculum. Our own personal things we're meant to accomplish and achieve. Our own personal things we're meant to overcome. Our own challenges that are unique to us. Our own midos, our own character traits that we come in both good and bad. Okay? And all of this gets woven together from the spiritual and the physical, that we're given an opportunity for our soul to come in, utilize this body, utilize this world for us as essentially our playground, right? To do with it the most that we can and to make the most of ourselves. It's a giant, giant responsibility, and it's a very, very tall order. That Hashem gives us the opportunity to come in for X number of years, and that's another part of the challenge. We don't know what we have, right? We talked about that last week. We have no idea. We have no idea what Hashem has planned for us. We do know, based on what's written, that the more mitzvot we do, that we have the opportunity to make change. We have the opportunity to actually extend our lifespan based upon our work here. Right? It says, Tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Tzedakah saves us from death. Right? There are multiple accounts in the text that talk about the fact that someone was maybe supposed to die, chas v'shalom, at this age, but because they gave tzedakah or they did mitzvot, Hashem gave them another X number of years. You've heard stories like that? You've heard stories and things written about that? So our actions play a role in a co-creation with Hashem. It's not that necessarily everything is predestined. Our free will enables us the ability to co-create with Hashem. We just have to pay attention to what we're writing. We have to understand every day. I just read this. Where did I read this? Last night or the night before. My face was in so many books, I'm forgetting where I read. It might have been in Rav Aryeh Kaplan's book. The idea that every single morning it's a new page in our book of life. And then at the end of our lives, when we go up and we're shown our book, this is everything that we've written through our actions and our choices. Make sense? So now, okay, I'm going to pause. Any questions? Any comments so far? So I just introduced another very major new concept, the idea that Hashem runs the world on mida keneged mida. And this concept is foundational. The idea that Hashem's judgment is perfect and unerring, no errors, right? And that we have to know, as a part of our faith, that that's the truth, regardless of what it appears to us in this blink of time. I was watching a lecture by Rav Yosef Mizrahi, and he was talking about the idea that this idea of Gilgulim and this idea of how things in our such a narrow view, our limited view of time, can seem and appear so unjust. Okay? So he brings the example, and I think it's a great one. He brings the example that we see, chas v'shalom lo aleinu, we see a child suffer for whatever reason. We see, let's say, chas v'shalom, they become sick, a child. And we say, how could Hashem do that? How could Hashem possibly make a child suffer like that? Right? That's a natural human nature thing to say. You know, where is God? Why isn't God healing this child? And then he says, okay, fine, fair enough. In our limited view, that's very reasonable to think that or to say that, to have those feelings. What if you found out that soul that's in the body of that child was a Nazi who tortured and murdered thousands of Jews in his previous lifetime? And that Hashem brought him back into this body and have him suffer as a part of the consequence for his behavior and actions in a previous lifetime. Then suddenly we have a little bit of a different perspective. And maybe we see, oh, well, maybe there's some justification to that child suffering. It appears to us to be one thing, but in the scope of Hashem's purview, what Hashem sees and what Hashem knows, it might be very fair. We don't know those things. There's no way for us to know those things. And so even though we have our human reactions and our human emotions, right, we have to understand that there's a bigger picture that we're not privy to. And so that is where the concept of accepting the fact that Hashem's world is perfectly just comes in. For as difficult and complicated as that idea is, that is a fundamental tenet of Judaism. It's a fundamental tenet of Torah to understand that we could not possibly know the bigger picture. And so we go through our experience and we do our best to elevate our consciousness and to elevate our thoughts and to better have an acceptance of things going on around us and to manage them as best we can, even if we don't understand them. Even if we don't understand them.
That leads to what I wanted to say, which is, why did Yosef HaSadik have to be immersed in Mitzrayim? Why did that Roman emperor have the situation you described earlier? We don't know. And there are normal people wandering around in our lives, Jewish, non-Jewish, completely secular, knowing nothing about the Bible, caring nothing about the Bible, and we don't know about them either.
Correct. We don't know. We don't know. And so even more supporting of the point that when we maintain this higher level of perspective, let's call it that, a perspective, that there's a much larger picture, and that these ideas of Gilgulim and Olam Haba and Mida Keneged Mida are the construct of the world that Hashem created, so we can begin to release a lot of our own personal judgment, right? When you have, I had a situation a few years back where I got into this conflict with this person that I really don't even know them, and I got into this conflict with this person, and it seemingly made absolutely no sense. I mean, there was like no. It was at every turn it kept getting worse and made less sense. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like something that seemed like so simple and straightforward, and then every time that there was like an action, it went the opposite direction and made less sense than before. Like, and it got to the point where I was like, what on earth is going on here? What am I doing wrong? Like, why is this even in my movie? Why is this happening from the set? Not why is it happening for me? No, not that at all. I was trying to step back and say, okay, there's no sense to this. I don't know this person at all. I've like no dealings with them. There's nothing. And then this comes up, and it became more and more complicated. I finally looked at my husband. I said, you need to call one of your people that you know in Israel that have like more of a mikubal type of an outlook about things, and ask, like, what's going on here? Because every time I thought I'm doing something that's going to make the situation better, it only made it worse, right? And the person was asking for a very specific resolution to the issue. And my view was, but why would I do that? Why would I give that to you? It makes no sense. Like, you know. So long story short, my husband did do that. After already a couple months of this, where I saw there's no end in sight and it makes no sense to me whatsoever, my husband called and he asked one of our rebbeim in Israel, who is in the world of Mikubal, if you understand, and he basically said, Shaul, he said, tell your wife to finish with it. Give the person what they're asking for. This is totally a past life issue. She owe him this money. She owe him this whatever. He said, pay it. Finish. And it's going to go away. And that's exactly what I did, and that's exactly what happened. You cannot escape your karma. If you owe someone, you will pay them. If they owe you, they will pay you. Whether that's with physical money, whether that's with a situation, whether that's with an experience, there's no escaping your karma. There's no escaping your tikkun. There is no escaping what you came here to fix or make up for. Does that make sense? That was the first time in my life that I really saw firsthand, real life, real time, what that meant. The rabbi said, why didn't you call me 2 months ago? I would have told you to pay the guy immediately on the first day it happened. You never would have gone through all the drama of the last 2 months. How would I know? Who thinks like that even? And that's what brings me to really the primary point of this shiur, is the idea that of asking. Now that we have a general broad scopes understanding, I hope, of some of these concepts, Olam Haba, Gilgulim, Mida Keneged Mida, how Hashem is running the world, the system in which we're all involved with, that you cannot escape from, okay? Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. When someone says to me, I don't believe that, right? I always have the same answer that I say to them. If you're aware of what the scientific concept of gravity is, correct? Most people say yes. You learn about gravity in 3rd grade or 4th grade, whatever grade you're learning it about. Right? We understand gravity is the force in which keeps everything down on the earth and not floating up into the sky. Okay? So when someone says to me, well, I don't believe that, I say, fantastic, that's wonderful. Are you familiar with gravity? Of course I'm familiar with gravity. If you stopped believing in gravity right now, you just decided, I don't believe in gravity anymore. To me, it makes no sense. Would you begin to float off the earth? No, you wouldn't. Because you're bound by the physical laws of this universe that Hashem created. Your belief in gravity is irrelevant to how gravity acts upon you? Irrelevant. Hashem and the world and the physical world do not care if you believe in gravity. You're born into this world, you are subject to the physical laws of this universe, and gravity is one of them. And gravity could not care less whether you believe it in or not. And this is the identical analogy for us as physical beings, as spiritual beings living in a physical world. Right? Hashem and the spiritual world does not care if you believe in it or not. Regardless of your belief, the entire matrix is acting upon you. And it is really up to you as to how you engage with it. Your belief in Hashem's systems is irrelevant to the system. And so the sooner that you wake up, and the sooner you understand the system within which you are operating, the better your chances are for a positive outcome. Does this make sense? The Yetzer Hara does not care if you believe in him, because he's there. And he is going to act on you, and he is going to push you, and he is going to use you however he wants to. And the less aware of him, the more powerful he is on you. The less you accept and understand his presence and his power, the more you are a tool for him. At least if you create an awareness and a sense of understanding that he exists, number one, that he's a master at his craft, that it's his job in this world until Mashiach comes to do what he does, then you can be nothing other than a puppet in his hands. It is only your awareness of him and your consciousness of how the system works that you can even begin to fight him and his influences on you. But going back to what I said, your belief in his existence is irrelevant. Your belief in the existence of your own soul is irrelevant, because it's going on with or without you. Your soul is in the body, and the time is going to tick by regardless of what you believe. Does that make sense? And so this is why I said at the beginning of the last shiur that this topic, this idea of Gilgulim, this idea of Olam Haba, and now the introduction of the idea of Mida Keneged Mida, is quite possibly the single most important subject that I've ever spoken on. Because if you don't have an awareness of these concepts, if you don't think about these concepts, if you do not start living your life with an understanding and appreciation for the existence of these concepts as a construct of Hashem's world, you can't possibly reveal your greatest potential and have your greatest outcomes from this physical lifetime. You can't. It's impossible. So the sooner that you chew on these ideas and you wake yourself up and you say, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. This is what I am a part of. This is the water I'm swimming in. The better off you're going to be. Not just you. Not just you. Your spouse, your children, your parents, your family. You know, the other day my parents were here when I was in Israel. My parents were so lovely, and they came and they stayed here with my family in order to help out here in my absence. And I'm deeply grateful to them for doing that. When I got home, I had to handle some of the things that came up while I was gone. Some people helped with carpool and so on and so forth. And I was calling people to thank them and to pay whatever tutors I had to pay, just to basically tie up loose ends and take care of business. And my dad had been sitting in the kitchen having his coffee and kind of overhearing me on the phone. And when I got off the phone with one of the ladies I was talking to, he had tears in his eyes. And I looked at him and I said, Dad, what's up? Why are you emotional? He said, I'm listening to you, and I'm so proud of the mensch that you've become. He said, I hear how you deal with people. I hear how you're so honest and you're so fair, and that you want to do good by people. And I'm so proud of you, of who you've become. Now, I don't share that with you to toot my horn. That's irrelevant. It's not about ego. I share that with you because deep down inside, my hope is that when my dad sees that, he wants to be a better Jew. I want him to see that the way I became who I am and the way I work on myself is exactly through this. It's through these concepts. It's through the Torah. It's through the way Hashem created the world. I just plug myself in to this system and I say, Hashem, help me make the best of what you've offered us. Does that make sense? I hope deep down inside that my dad makes the connection in his own mind. Wow, look at my daughter. The more observant she becomes, the more quote-unquote religious she becomes, the more deeply immersed in Hashem's ways that she becomes, the greater of a human being I witness her becoming. That's my deepest hope. Is it nice to hear that my dad's proud of me? Absolutely. Do I hope that I get some points for making my dad feel nachas, in seeing me? Absolutely. But the true value that I want to come from that statement and from his realization is I want him to draw closer to Hashem. I want him to hopefully see how I'm doing it and to do the same. I didn't grow up with a particularly religious family. And my parents do their best when they're with us. They join in and they join in the Shabbat and they join in everything. And I see little by little they're doing more and doing more because they see my kids doing it. And my dad said, well, if my grandson, who is so much younger than me, can do that, then of course so can I. The idea, if we're living our lives in the way that brings us closer to Hashem, then we should be able to magically and invisibly influence the energy field around us and whoever's within that energy field, whoever we come in contact with, to leave them better off than how they were before they came in contact with us. This is the magic of the system that Hashem has put together. And through our awareness of His matrix, of what He's created, we should potentially have the power to do that. So when we reflect on these concepts, now we have to bring it much more personally into our lives. We have to say, okay, we've been now empowered with the idea of a Gilgul. We've been empowered with the idea of Olam Haba. We've been empowered with the idea that Hashem's judgment is perfect. Mida keneged mida. What does it mean when we look at our spouse? What does it mean when we have an encounter with someone in the grocery store? What does it mean when we interact with our children, with our neighbors, with our community, Jewish or non-Jewish? Now you need to take everything I've taught you in the last shiur and this shiur, and you need to start bringing it home. If you have conflicts with people, understand they're not new. If you have people that you cannot seem to get along with, understand it's not the first time. If you can't explain things in any other logical way, most likely these are deep-seated, pre-existing conditions. We are married to the person that we are married to, or we are divorced to the people that we are divorced from, for reasons that pre-existed. Hashem predetermined children had to come into the world through certain paths, through certain avenues, certain unions. We see that in this week's Torah portion with Dinah. The most inexplicable situations we see throughout the Torah, and then we see what comes from it. Okay? We have to begin to look around and say, I know 100%, such a funny story. Some of you who know my kids, such a funny story with one of my daughters. When my daughter, she's a giant neshama, bli ayin hara, God bless her. She is an absolute, you know me, I'm very biased. All my kids are tzaddikim and tzaddikot, right? Baruch Hashem. But this one daughter of mine, in her own, they're very different, each one of my kids, but she's an absolute tzaddikess. But she was little, she was a spitfire, okay? Just harifa, total spitfire, this one. I remember when she was around 3 years old, okay? Now you have to understand, this is going to sound a little woo-woo, but I think you'll appreciate the story. This is a neshama that came to me before she was even born. She came to me about 7 months before she was conceived, and she's pushing. I could feel this female soul wanting to come into the world. And I felt it for days, her aura around me and this soul pushing it. I'm ready to come in, Ima, I'm ready to come in. And finally I said out loud, don't talk to me, talk to your Abba. I'm ready. Go talk, convince your Abba that he's ready for another one, right? And then all of a sudden her presence kind of disappeared. And 7 months later I got pregnant, and it was with this daughter. Okay? When she was about 3 years old, she was so feisty. Oh my gosh, so defiant, unbelievable. I was holding her on my lap, and I was looking her in the eyes, and she was doing something, I don't know what, she was not listening, or she was being like very feisty. And I looked her in the eyes and I said to her, listen carefully. I said, in this lifetime, I'm the Ima. I don't care if you were the Ima in the last lifetime. In this lifetime, I'm in charge. I'm the Ima, you're the daughter. And she looked at me, and she stared in my eyes, and she held her gaze with me for, a good 30 seconds, like challenging me. And then she just looked down and snuggled into my shoulder, like as if to say, okay, I accept, you're the Ima. And from that point forward, it was much better. But it's just so funny, because souls travel together. They travel together in packs. In this lifetime, you're the mother, and the last time, the other one was the mother. Sometimes it was a husband, and now, instead of husband and wife, it's father and daughter. We don't know. We don't know what is the reparations and the relationships and what we need to fix. When we have challenges with people, we have to understand that those people are in our lives for a reason. And they're very deep reasons, and they're deeply rooted reasons, and they're pre-existing conditions. And so we begin to zoom out and look at all of our relationships in the context of these concepts of Gilgulim. And understanding that Hashem has given us a system within which that if we do anyway what we're meant to do, if we do the mitzvot we're meant to do, if we repair relationships and we build relationships and we build our relationship with Hashem. Remember, we're building Ben Adam that small. We build our own internal midos and character. Okay, we build our relationships Ben Adam l'chaveiro, and we build our relationship, especially Ben Adam l'makom, with Hashem. That in the end, ultimately, God willing, we're going to have a successful outcome. In 120 years, when we go up in Shamayim, that we're going to see the Olam Haba we've built for ourselves, because we made the most of whatever Gilgul that we're in. And in the end, we know that Hashem is a fair and equitable judge. And we have to trust in that. Make sense? So I'm giving you guys a lot of information. These shiurim, I hope, are very rich for you. And again, they're not such simple concepts. You guys are doing a great job at taking them in. And I encourage you to listen to the shiurim again and review and think about it and go to your journals. Go into your journals. Write down, where do you have challenges in your relationships? Write down, think about your life. Where did people come in and out of your life? So many times people ebb and flow right into our lives. There's a reason when someone goes out of our life, there's a reason for it. The tikkun is finished. There's no need for them to be there anymore. Sometimes it's in what appears to be bad circumstances, and sometimes it's just a function of the relationship fades away. But everything serves its purpose. And we're able to consciously participate in the life that we're creating and make an assessment and an analysis of where our life is currently holding, where we can do better, how we can do better with the people around us. Where can we make peace? Like Aaron, Rodef Shalom. Where can we chase peace? When you have peace in your life, when you're at peace with everyone around you, you know you're doing it right. Right? You're doing what it takes to resolve things. whether that means to mevater, meaning like, you are quote unquote letting the other person win. Like when I paid this person, I say, okay, I'm mevater. Obviously, if this is a past life issue and it's not going to go away until it's done, of course, I want it solved. What do I want this in my life for? I want peace. Make sense?
Robertson, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's about your daughter that you were, before you got pregnant, you were able to feel her presence. How were you able to do that? Because I wasn't able to feel that.
It was not something I was seeking out. It was not something I was seeking out. It's just something that I felt, and in the beginning I kind of just, pushed it to the side, and it became more and more pronounced. And almost as a joke, I was kind of like, if this is real, then I want you to know. I wanted her to know, like, I'm ready anytime. Whenever Hashem says it's time for you to come into this world, I'm ready. People talk about they have different experiences, where they have certain feelings about what during their pregnancy, if it's a boy or a girl, or maybe they have dreams, or I don't know. There's so many different ways that Hashem communicates with us. And sometimes it's just a function of us listening.
Thank you. That was so beautiful.
You're welcome. So if you're, yeah, please go ahead, Danielle.
I'm so sorry.
No?
I remember the name of my friend who passed away.
Please.
And I owe her so much gratitude. She passed when she was a beautiful soul, and her name is Sarah. But Leah and Chaim.
Okay.
And she's the one that introduced me to my husband, so
she
has a big zchut up there.
Amazing. So Le'ilui Nishmas, Sarah, Bas, Leah, v'Chaim.
Leah, v'Chaim. Amen.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I want to just we're already at 11:22 a.m. I want to just briefly ask if there's anything that you need clarification on. Otherwise, I'll tell you that I would love for you to go back again, listen to the shiur again, take notes, and start making personal reflection on how this content is tied to you and your own personal life experience, both past and present. And most importantly, like we talked about last week, life before these shiurim and life after these shiurim. What are the differences going to be? How are you going to do things differently? How are you going to view things differently? How will you make your assessment? And keep work to keep a higher level of consciousness about all of these different concepts playing out in your life on a day-to-day basis. If there's anything that needs clarification before we conclude. No, you're good? Go ahead.
But could you, before you leave, in just briefly, what should we take out of this class? Because there's so many concepts. So what should we take out of this class, and how should we put it in our daily life? Okay, so it is a lot of concepts. Now remember, I really only introduced one totally brand new concept in this class. And that was the idea of Mida Keneged Mida, and the idea that Hashem's judgment is perfect, even if we don't understand it, right? Because we're existing in a very, very small window of time, and we could not possibly have the view that Hashem has to really understand the tapestry of His creation, of how all of us intersect and interact and relate throughout the span of time. Okay? So my suggestion is to review between last shiur and this shiur the primary concepts of Gilgulim, Olam Haba, and Mida Keneged Mida, and how those three pillars all intersect with one another in the dynamics of the spiritual and physical world. Does that make sense? Now, once you've reviewed and you take notes and you feel like you have a grasp of them, then you need to begin to look at your own life experience to say,
How are these things playing out in my own life? Where are there dynamics or situations that I don't understand, or conflicts that I have with people, or conflicts I have within myself about things I believe or don't understand in my relationship with Hashem, or about my own internal working? Where are there middos that I'm either unaware of completely or aware of and need to fix? Right? So everything that we talk about is all falling under the umbrella of what we discussed early on in the shiurim of the three structures of relationships of Ben Adam Latzmo, right? A man's relationship with himself, a man's relationship with his other human beings, and a man's relationship with Hashem. So those are always three great paradigms to look at things through. And you can take each one of those concepts and run it through these ideas of Gilgulim and mitzvot that you can do to build your olam haba. What can you be doing internally with your own mental makeup? What mitzvot could you physically be doing? Right? How could you be talking to Hashem more and making more kavanah in your davening? Was one of the things that we discussed, how challenging that is. Right? So there's a lot of material here for you to dive into. A lot that you can dive into. A lot of self-reflection is needed. Review and reflection and contemplation about how you're doing things and how it can be done better or differently. And I think it's always important to be reviewing your most close relationships and asking where there can be healing. Because where there's healing, there's tikkun, there's fixing. And where there's fixing, this can only be a good thing. Does that make sense?
Totally. Thank you so much. I have a question, Dr. Mia.
Sure.
Regarding relationship, because I have some concepts that I've been working for the past few years that I want to launch my business as well in a non-profit organization. And I have a quick question. For you, on your understanding, relationships are by design or co-design?
Say it again. Relationships are?
By design or co-design?
Okay, what do you mean? Explain to me what you mean by design or co-design, just so I make sure I answer in the right way.
So I consider that there is nothing new. So nothing can be created anew. Everything is being done co-creatively, like with Hashem, the help of Hashem, and through whatever the tikkunim we need to do in this life. Mm-hmm. So some of those concepts that I wanted to develop is this: are the relationships just by design, or is being co-created by me, co-designed by me with the help of Hashem? Okay, so the first premise is to understand that when you say relationships, so there's different kinds of relationships, of course, but the core people in your life, your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your children, right? Hashem orchestrated all of that, right? And then you have other relationships that are people that you come in contact with through the natural course of your life. So schoolmates, right? Classmates, co-workers, neighbors, right? So we understand that in Hashem's creation, nothing is by accident. Anybody that you're coming in contact with, whether it's literally standing behind someone in line at the market, or someone that you work very, very closely with in your job, or a classmate that you went through all your years of schooling with, none of that is an accident, right? Hashem puts your soul, right, in certain circumstances for whatever reasons He has to do it. Whether it's repairing something from a previous Gilgul, whether that person will become a messenger for you in something that you're meant to learn in your own personal curriculum. We don't know exactly why they're there, but we do know that they're there on purpose. Now, here is where free will comes into play. What you choose to do with those relationships is where the co-creation comes in.
what you choose, the relationship you choose to build with your spouse as a primary example is a co-creation, right? You are co-creating that relationship. Hashem put you into that relationship, make no doubt about it. But what you do with and in that relationship is on you and your spouse as co-creators with Hashem in that relationship. So really it's both. It's not one or the other. Hashem is creating the scenario by putting you in contact with whomever you're in contact with, but what you do with that is of your own free will. Does that make sense?
Yes. So it's relationships are by design and co-created.
Absolutely. That's really where the whole concept of a b'sheres, right? That comes in. The idea that before Hashem, Hashem splits a soul into a male and female part and sends those souls into the body. And before he does that, there's an announcement in Shamayim that says, this soul belongs to this soul. And those are the souls that are meant to reunite in this world together in marriage partnership. Now, whether or not that happens, that's a whole other shiur, a whole other conversation. There's reasons why it may not happen, depending on people's behaviors and so on and so forth. But let's just keep it super, super simple to say that is by design. And then how that relationship unfolds is between the two people with Hashem,
That's wonderful.
All right.
The things that I've developed is based on that. Whatever I want to be creating, and I want to be creating with this in mind, that it's by design and co-created.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to let everyone go. Thank you so much for coming this week. I hope it's been helpful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I'll do my best to get the recordings up as soon as possible. I'm wishing everyone an amazing rest of the week and a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. And Be'ezrat Hashem will meet together again next week. There's going to be one Wednesday at the end of January where we won't meet. That's the winter vacation for a lot of the Jewish day schools, and my kids are also on vacation. So that week we won't meet, but I'll make sure to email you guys that date. But next week, Be'ezrat Hashem will be together. Okay? Have a wonderful week and a wonderful Shabbos. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.